The claiming moon hung heavy in the sky, bathing the ceremonial grounds in silver light. The air smelled of pine smoke and anticipation, thick with the musk of hundreds of wolves gathered for the most important night of the year. Seraphine stood at the edge of the unmarked circle, her feet bare against the cold stone, her simple white shift marking her as one of the unclaimed. The fabric was thin, deliberately so according to tradition, and the autumn wind cut through it like a blade, but she barely felt the chill. She'd grown numb to physical discomfort long ago. Around her, dozens of young wolves waited in various states of hope and terror, their eyes fixed on the platform where the pack's eligible males prowled like predators selecting prey. Some of the females smoothed their hair nervously. Others stood with chins lifted in desperate confidence. A few wept silently, overwhelmed by the magnitude of the moment. This was the night of first bonds, the most sacred tradition of the Valdris pack. The night when unmated females stood in the moonlight and prayed to be chosen. The night that would determine the course of their entire lives. And for the third year in a row, Seraphine would walk away from it alone. She could feel the whispers crawling across her skin like insects, the sideways glances, the barely concealed smirks. 3 years unclaimed was unusual. 3 years unclaimed was a message. 3 years unclaimed meant one thing in the eyes of her pack: unwanted. Still standing in the circle, Seraphine? The voice cut through the murmurs like a blade dipped in honey. How brave of you. Or is it desperate? I can never tell the difference with you. Isolde emerged from the crowd, her crimson gown clinging to curves that had captured the attention of every unmated male in the territory. Golden hair cascaded down her back in perfect waves, and her ice-blue eyes glittered with barely concealed malice. She was everything Seraphine wasn't. Wealthy, connected, the daughter of the pack's most powerful elder, and she had made tormenting Seraphine her personal mission since childhood. 3 years. Isolde circled her slowly, making sure her voice carried to the gathered crowd. 3 years, and not a single male has wanted you. Not even the desperate ones. Not even the old widowers looking for someone to warm their beds. She leaned closer, her whisper sharp as a knife. What does that say about you, I wonder? Seraphine's wolf stirred uneasily in her chest, but she kept her face carefully blank. She couldn't react. She couldn't defend herself. Not without revealing everything. Perhaps she's defective, someone called from the crowd. Laughter rippled through the gathering. Maybe her wolf is broken. Or maybe, Isolde said, her voice rising for maximum effect, she's simply not worth claiming. Some wolves are born to serve after all. To scrub floors and empty chamber pots. She reached out and fingered the rough fabric of Seraphine's shift with theatrical disgust. This certainly suits her better than a mating gown ever would. The heat of humiliation crept up Seraphine's neck, but she forced her breathing to remain steady. She'd endured worse. She would endure this. He told me to be strong. He told me there was a reason. Nothing to say? Isolde's smile sharpened. No defense? Honestly, at this point, it's almost cruel to let her participate. Someone should tell the poor thing to give up. Enough, Isolde. The voice came from the shadows, quiet but carrying an authority that made everyone freeze. Elder Mordecai stepped forward, his weathered face impassive. As the pack's oldest surviving member and keeper of their laws, his word carried weight that even Isolde's father couldn't dismiss. The ceremony is about to begin, he said, his pale eyes sweeping across the gathered wolves. All unmarked females will take their positions, including Seraphine. Isolde executed a mocking curtsy. Of course, Elder. I was merely concerned for her feelings. Your concern is noted. Mordecai's tone made it clear the conversation was over. As Isolde swept away with one last poisonous glance, Seraphine allowed herself a single breath of relief. But the respite was short-lived. The ceremonial drums had begun to pound, and across the grounds, the pack's alpha males were descending from the viewing platform. This was the moment when everything could fall apart. The claiming worked simply. Males would walk among the unclaimed females, following their instincts, their wolves guiding them toward compatible mates. When a male found the female meant for him, he would take her hand and lead her to the bonding altar. Simple, sacred, inescapable. Unless, of course, you were already bonded in secret. Seraphine's heart hammered against her ribs as she watched the males spread out among the waiting females. She could feel her mark burning beneath the concealment charm, the invisible brand that proclaimed her as taken, as his, as something far more precious than anyone here could possibly imagine. If anyone discovered the truth tonight. A commotion near the main gates shattered her spiraling thoughts. The crowd parted like water before a blade, whispers erupting into gasps of shock and awe. Warriors dropped to their knees. Elders bowed their heads. Even the arrogant young males stumbled backward in hasty deference. Seraphine's blood turned to ice. No, not here. Not tonight. He emerged from the darkness like a storm given flesh. Tall, commanding, dark hair falling across a face carved from shadow and starlight. His silver eyes swept across the ceremonial grounds with the cold assessment of a predator surveying his territory. The Alpha King, conqueror of the 7 territories, destroyer of the Blood Moon Rebellion, the most powerful wolf to walk the earth in 300 years, and her secret mate. Kaelin, what are you doing? She screamed the thought at him through their bond, even knowing he couldn't hear specific as words. Only emotions passed between them across distances. And right now, she was broadcasting pure, undiluted panic. His silver eyes found her in the crowd, held her for one devastating heartbeat. Then he looked away, as if she were nothing. My lords, my ladies. His voice rolled across the gathering like thunder, commanding instant silence. Forgive my intrusion on your sacred ceremony. I come seeking wolves for my personal guard. Your pack has a reputation for producing fine warriors. The explanation was smooth, reasonable, perfectly crafted, and complete horseshit. He'd come because of her. Because tonight was the 3rd anniversary of her remaining unclaimed, and the pressure on her had grown unbearable. Because he'd felt her distress through their bond and hadn't been able to stay away. You shouldn't be here, she thought desperately. Someone will notice. As if hearing her fear, his gaze flickered to her again. Just for an instant. But in that instant, she saw everything. The worry, the possessiveness, the barely restrained urge to tear apart anyone who dared mock what was his. Then Isolde stepped directly into his path. Alpha King. Her voice dripped honey as she sank into an elaborate curtsy, making certain her gown displayed her assets to maximum advantage. What an honor to have you grace our humble ceremony. I am Isolde, daughter of Elder Thuron. If you're seeking warriors, perhaps I could personally guide you to our training grounds. Seraphine's wolf snarled inside her chest, sudden and vicious. Mine. He's mine. She crushed the reaction immediately. She couldn't afford to let her emotions bleed through the bond, to let him sense her jealousy and do something catastrophically stupid. But watching Isolde press closer to him, watching her rival's hand reach out to touch his arm, the Alpha King's voice cut through like a blade of ice. Remove your hand. Isolde froze, her smile faltering. Forgive me. I only meant, I don't repeat myself. The words were quiet, calm, and absolutely terrifying. Isolde stumbled backward, her face draining of color. Everyone suddenly remembered exactly who they were dealing with. This was the king who'd burned the Blackthorn fortress to the ground, with his enemies still inside it. Continue your ceremony, he said, already turning away. I'll be gone by dawn. As he passed within feet of Seraphine, close enough that she could smell pine and steel and that indefinable wildness that was uniquely him, his emotions whispered through their bond. Not words, but a pulse of pure feeling. Hold on, little wolf. Not much longer now. Then he was gone, leaving her with her heart pounding and Isolde's hatred burning into her back like a brand. She'd survived another claiming moon. But something told her the real danger was only beginning. 3 days after the Alpha King's unexpected visit, the Valdris pack was still buzzing with speculation. Seraphine moved through the servants' quarters with her head down and her presence small, the way she'd learned to exist in a pack that considered her less than nothing. Her duties as a healer's assistant kept her busy from dawn to dusk, mixing poultices, grinding herbs, tending to minor injuries. It was humble work, invisible work. Exactly what kept her beneath notice? Did you see how he looked at Isolde? A kitchen maid gushed as Seraphine passed. She says he's going to send for her. That he was clearly interested. Seraphine's hands tightened on her herb basket. She kept walking, kept her face neutral, kept the wolf inside her from snarling. She was nearly to the healer's cottage when a hand shot out and grabbed her arm, yanking her into a shadowed alcove. Isolde's face filled her vision, beautiful and terrible with rage. You think I didn't see? The words came in a venomous hiss. The Alpha King looked at you, like you mattered, like you were something more than the pathetic Omega everyone knows you are. She noticed. Ice flooded Seraphine's veins. You're imagining things, Seraphine said carefully. Why would the Alpha King look twice at a servant? That's exactly what I want to know. Isolde's grip tightened. What are you hiding, little mouse? For one terrible moment, Seraphine felt the concealment charm on her shoulder blade pulse with heat. If Isolde touched her there, if the charm failed. Isolde! Healer Marin stood at the alcove entrance, weathered face creased with disapproval. Release my assistant immediately. Isolde's grip loosened. Of course, healer. Just a friendly conversation. Your conversations tend to leave bruises. Marin's tone could have frozen fire. Seraphine, come. As Seraphine fled, Isolde's whisper followed. This isn't over. I'm going to find out what you're hiding. And when I do, I'll destroy you. Inside the cottage, Seraphine finally breathed. That girl has been trouble since she could walk, Marin said, preparing calming tea. Drink. It will help. Seraphine sipped gratefully. But Marin's next words brought tension flooding back. She's right about one thing. You are hiding something. Seraphine's grip tightened on the cup. 3 years unclaimed, yet no wasting sickness. Your wolf grows stronger, not weaker. Marin's pale eyes studied her. I know the scent of a bonded female. And you, despite what everyone believes, carry a bond. All this time, she'd been so certain the concealment charm hid everything. Don't be terrified. I've told no one. Marin settled across from her. But I'm curious. Who requires such secrecy? What mate would let his female be mocked rather than claim her publicly? The question struck at everything. I can't tell you, Seraphine finally said. If anyone found out, then keep your secrets. Marin's expression softened. But know that if you ever need help, my door is open. Seraphine's throat tightened. In 3 years of isolation, this was the first unconditional kindness anyone had shown her. The cavern lay hidden deep within, the thornwood, concealed by ancient magic and a waterfall that sang secrets to the stones. To find it, you had to know exactly where to look, had to slip between 2 boulders that seemed too close together for passage, had to wade through knee-deep water that was somehow warm despite the season, had to trust that the darkness beyond led somewhere safe, their sanctuary. The only space where Seraphine could simply be his. She arrived first, as she always did, slipping through the waterfall's edge with practiced ease. The cavern beyond took her breath away, even now, even after all this time. Thermal springs bubbled up through the rock floor, filling the air with gentle steam. Phosphorescent moss painted the walls in soft blues and greens, creating an otherworldly glow that made the space feel less like a cave and more like something from a dream. Kaelin had found this place during the war, he'd told her. A refuge from the endless bloodshed, the constant weight of command. He'd never brought anyone else here, only her. She settled on the furs piled near the largest spring, drawing her knees to her chest. Her heart had started racing the moment she'd left pack grounds, and it hadn't slowed since. Anticipation, longing, the desperate, aching need to feel his arms around her. 12 days since she'd seen him last, 12 days that felt like 12 years. She heard him before she saw him, the whisper of movement through the waterfall, the subtle shift in the air that announced his presence. Then he was there, framed in the entrance like a dark god descending into his hidden kingdom. Water streaming from his dark hair, his massive frame silhouetted against the phosphorescent glow. Their eyes met. The world stopped. Seraphine. Her name in his voice, like it was the only word that mattered. She was in his arms before she realized she'd moved. He held her like she might shatter, his face buried in her hair, his massive frame trembling. "I'm sorry," he breathed. "The ceremony. I shouldn't have come. It was reckless." "I know, but you came anyway. I felt you. Your distress." His jaw tightened. That woman. The things she said. "Do you know how close I came to claiming you right there?" The image sent a thrill through her. To be publicly claimed, to watch Isolde's face. But she pushed the fantasy away. "How much longer?" she asked. "Until it's safe?" The silence that followed was answer enough. "There's been a development." Something in his tone made her pull back. "My council is pressuring me to mate, officially. They've presented candidates, daughters of allied alphas." His jaw worked. "They're pushing for a decision within weeks." "What will you tell them?" "The truth. I choose my own mate." "And if they push harder?" His silver eyes met hers, and she saw something that made her breath catch. Fear. There are factions who would do anything to control succession. If they discovered I was already bonded, especially to an Omega from a minor pack, they might try to eliminate the obstacle. Kill her. "That's why we've been hiding," she said slowly. "Not just politics. They would actually—" Yes. 3 years of separation. 3 years of watching her suffer from a distance. All to keep her alive. There has to be another way. There is. He cupped her face. "I'm making changes. Shifting power. Removing those who threaten what's mine." His voice dropped, dark and dangerous. "Give me 3 more months, Seraphine. Then I'll tear down every barrier. I'll claim you before the world and destroy anyone who objects." Fire raced through her veins. 3 months, she repeated. "Can you endure?" She thought of Isolde's cruelty, the whispers, the grinding loneliness. Then she looked into his eyes and saw unshakable love. "Yes," she whispered. "For you, I can endure anything." He kissed her, deep and desperate, tasting of apology and promise. Just before dawn, he gave her gifts. A new concealment charm, stronger than the last. And something else. "I've arranged a summons, an official order requesting a healer's assistant for the royal court." His eyes blazed. "In 3 weeks you'll travel to Ironhold. To me. Not as my mate, not yet, but close enough that I can protect you directly." Leaving everything she'd known, moving into the Alpha King's territory. Dangerous, terrifying, wonderful. "Yes," she said before he finished explaining. "I'll come." 3 weeks? It felt like a beginning. The journey to Ironhold took 5 days by carriage, traversing mountain passes that made Seraphine's ears pop, and the ancient forests where the trees grew so thick that noon felt like dusk. She traveled with a small escort, 2 guards from her pack, who seemed more interested in complaining about the weather than conversation. Which suited her fine. She spent the hours watching the landscape shift from familiar to foreign, her mind churning with equal parts anticipation and dread. As the carriage crested the final rise on the 5th day, Seraphine's breath caught in her throat. Ironhold rose from volcanic rock like a crown of black stone, its towers reaching toward an ash-gray sky like fingers grasping at the heavens. Rivers of molten lava flowed through channels carved into the city's foundation, their orange glow painting the dark stone in shades of fire and blood. The heat reached her even from this distance, a warm breath against her face that carried the faint scent of sulfur. Walls etched with crimson runes pulsed with ancient protective magic, enchantments laid down 1,000 years ago, if the stories were true, and renewed with each generation. No army had ever breached those walls. No enemy had ever taken Ironhold by force, and everywhere she looked, wolves, training in massive courtyards, hawking wares in bustling marketplaces, running errands through streets that teemed with more life than her entire pack combined. Children chased each other between buildings, their laughter echoing off black stone. Warriors in gleaming armor marched in formation. Merchants argued over prices. Servants hurried about their duties. Tens of thousands of wolves, a nation united under his crown. I'm really here, she thought, something between wonder and terror blooming in her chest. I'm actually here. The carriage wound through to the citadel, gardens impossibly green against black stone, fountains throwing rainbows across marble paths, the palace itself, elegant and deadly, a blade wrapped in silk. So you're the healer's assistant. A tall woman studied her with cool assessment. Silver hair cropped short, a scar bisecting her left cheek, a pale line that spoke of old battles survived. Eyes holding the flat, dangerous calm of a predator at rest. I'm Commander Alara. I oversee support staff. Her gaze swept Seraphine with skepticism. The wounded in our healing halls aren't soft pack wolves. They're warriors with real injuries. If you can't handle it, you'll be sent home. I can handle it. We'll see. Ilara turned sharply. Quarters in the eastern wing. Work begins tomorrow. Through corridors of tapestries and displayed weapons, Seraphine felt him. The bond humming with proximity, growing stronger with every step. But when Ilara deposited her in a small room, it wasn't Kaelin who greeted her. It was a warning. A note slipped under her door. Plain paper, elegant script. The Vipers watch everything. Trust only the scarred wolf. Seraphine read it 3 times, heart hammering. The scarred wolf. Commander Ilara, the woman with the scar across her cheek. Who had sent this? And why would they want her to trust Ilara specifically? She burned the note, watching flames consume paper. Kaelin had warned her about factions, enemies who would do anything for power. But apparently, she also had allies she didn't know about. The game was more complex than she'd imagined. 2 weeks in Ironhold's healing halls had transformed Seraphine. Rows of beds stretched across a cavernous chamber, each occupied by wounded warriors. The air hung thick with blood and medicinal herbs and the groans of the suffering. New arrivals from the eastern border, announced head healer Thessaly, a gruff older wolf with hands like leather and eyes that missed nothing. Ambush by Nightfang rebels, silver poisoning, dark magic corruption. Seraphine moved without thinking, hands glowing as she knelt beside a young warrior whose chest had been torn open by claws laced with something foul. Silver in the wound. I can draw it out. Hours blurred together as she fought to save lives, By the time the last patient stabilized, she was shaking with exhaustion. That was remarkable work, Thessaly said grudgingly. Survival rates increased 30% since you arrived. Whatever your methods, I won't question them. But Seraphine barely heard, her attention snagged on a commotion at the hall's far end. Cannot simply barge in here demanding, I go where I please, in my own citadel. Kalen. He strode through like a storm barely contained, silver eyes sweeping wounded warriors with intensity that made seasoned fighters flinch. I'm here to observe the new healer I've heard so much about. Too obvious, Seraphine's pulse thundered. People will notice. But she could only bow as the Alpha King approached. You're from the Valdris pack, he said, voice cold and clinical, the perfect mask of a king evaluating a useful tool. Thessaly says you have unusual abilities. Show me. She demonstrated on a corruption-laced wound, golden light unraveling darkness thread by thread. Delicate work, nearly impossible with him standing close enough that she felt heat radiating from his body. The corruption dissolved. The warrior's breathing eased. Impressive, Kalen said quietly, then louder. This healer receives whatever resources she requires. He strode out without another word, but through their bond, his emotions whispered, You're magnificent. I knew you would be. That night, he came to her. A hidden passage in her wall slid open, a passage she hadn't known existed. A warm hand covered her mouth. It's me. Don't scream. She spun to face him in darkness. In the shadows, his silver eyes seemed to glow with their own light. Are you insane? Coming here. No one saw me. He pulled her into his arms. These passages were built by my grandfather. Only the king knows they exist. That was reckless today, in the healing halls. I had to see you. His voice was rough with desperation. 2 weeks knowing you're here, unable to touch you. It's driving me mad. She understood. The bond sang with proximity, demanding connection. Something's wrong, she said, studying his exhausted face. What's happened? He released a breath carrying the weight of kingdoms. Lord Cressiden, he's making his move. Ice through her veins. Cressidan was head of the traditionalist faction, wolves who believed blood and brutality were the only path to strength. She'd heard his name whispered in the healing halls, always with fear. He's demanding I take a noble mate. Says the kingdom won't accept an unmated king much longer. If I don't comply, his faction may have enough support to challenge my claim. A challenge meant a fight to the death. Then claim me, she said desperately. Now. Tonight. And you'd be dead before dawn. His voice cracked. The moment I acknowledge you publicly, you become the most valuable target in the 7 territories. Cressiden would move against you immediately. So what do we do? He pressed his forehead to hers. I'm working on something. Removing Cressiden's power base without triggering open conflict. But it takes time. Weeks. Maybe less. If my intelligence is accurate. His hands cupped her face. Can you hold on a little longer? She saw fear in his eyes, not for himself, but for her. The Alpha King, conqueror of nations, terrified of losing her. Yes, she whispered. For you, I can wait forever. He kissed her, soft and desperate, tasting of apology and promise. I swear it, Seraphine. Everyone will know you're mine. The attack came 3 days later. Warning bells tolled, not measured peals announcing visitors, but frantic clamor meaning one thing: invasion. An explosion rocked the citadel, sending Seraphine stumbling. The clash of steel filtered through stone walls, growing closer. This isn't a border skirmish, she realized aloud. They're inside the citadel. The healing hall doors burst open. Warriors in unfamiliar colors flooded in, their weapons drawn and eyes wild with bloodlust. Kill the healers! Someone roared. Leave none alive! Chaos erupted. Unarmed healers fought desperately against trained killers. A hand grabbed Seraphine's arm, yanking her toward a hidden door she hadn't noticed. Commander Ilara, scarred face grim, sword already dripping with enemy blood. Trust only the scarred wolf. Come if you want to live. They ran through narrow passages. What's happening? Cressidon's coup. Ilara's voice was flat with controlled fury. He's been planning this for months. Half the guard has turned traitor. She paused, something shifting in her expression. The king is fighting in the throne room, outnumbered 20-1. Through their bond, Seraphine felt Kaelin, pain, fury, desperate determination. He was alive. But for how long? Take me to him. Are you mad? The throne room is a slaughterhouse. Take me to him now. The words came out as a snarl, her wolf surging with protective rage. Something shifted in Ilara's expression. Understanding. You're her, she said quietly. The secret mate. The one he's been protecting all this time. The one I was told to watch over. No point denying it. Please, Seraphine whispered. Help me reach him. Ilara studied her for one moment, then nodded. Follow me. Try not to die. The throne room was hell. Bodies littered the obsidian floor, some in the black and silver of Kaelin's loyal guard, others in the blood red of Cressidon's rebels. Tapestries that had hung for centuries lay torn and burning. The great windows had been shattered, letting in the cold night air along with the screams of battle from elsewhere in the citadel. The air reeked of death and betrayal, copper thick with spilled blood. And in the center of the carnage, surrounded by enemies on all sides, Kaelin fought like a god of war. His massive black wolf form was a blur of lethal motion, tearing through traitors with savage efficiency. Claws that could shred steel armor found the gaps between plates. Jaws powerful enough to crush bone snapped shut on throats and spines. He moved like liquid shadow, like death given form, magnificent and terrible in his fury. Seraphine had never seen him fight before. Not truly. She'd known he was dangerous, had heard the stories of his conquests, but knowing and seeing were different things entirely. But even a god could be overwhelmed by numbers. For every wolf he killed, 2 more appeared to take its place. His black fur was matted with blood, some of it his enemies, but not all. She could see the wounds accumulating, the slight favoring of his left side, the way his movements were growing fractionally slower as silver poison worked its way through his system, and circling the edges with patient malice, Lord Cressidon himself. "Surrender, boy king!" Cressidon's voice echoed. "Your time is over." Through their bond, Seraphine felt Kaelin's strength flagging. Silver in the weapons poisoning his blood. He was dying by inches. "I have to help him." "You go out there. You die," Ilara said flatly. "I die if he does. Our bond. If he falls, I fall with him. There's no version where I survive his death." Ilara drew her second sword, pressing it into Seraphine's hands. "Stay behind me. Don't stop moving." They crossed the battlefield, blades flashing everywhere. Ilara carved a path with brutal efficiency, 10 feet from Kaelin. 5. Then Cressidon appeared before them like a nightmare given form. The mysterious healer. His smile sharpened. "You reek of his bond mark even through your concealment charm, the king's secret mate." He laughed. "Now I get to kill you first. Let him feel you die through that precious bond." He lunged. Ilara intercepted with a clash of steel, giving Seraphine her opening. She ran. The battlefield swallowed her immediately. Rebels grabbed at her arms, her hair, her throat. Blades whistled past her face, sliced shallow cuts across her arms and legs. She barely felt the pain. Adrenaline and desperation drove her forward, step after stumbling step. 10 feet from Kaelin. A rebel wolf lunged at her. She ducked under his claws, felt them whisper past her scalp. 5 feet. Another attacker. Ilara appeared from nowhere, sword singing, and the wolf fell. And then, she was there. She slammed into Kalen's massive wolf form, her hands pressing against blood-soaked fur that was hot with fever and slick with gore. She could feel his heartbeat beneath her palms. Too fast, too thready, a rhythm approaching failure. No, she thought fiercely, not like this, not today, not ever. She reached for her healing energy and found it waiting, brighter and stronger than it had ever been. 3 years of training, 3 years of techniques Kalen had taught her during stolen nights in their hidden cavern. 3 years of love poured into every lesson, every practice session, and every gentle correction. All of it came together now. Golden light erupted from her hands, flooding into his body like liquid sunlight. She felt the silver poison, threads of corruption woven through his blood, and she burned them away. Felt the torn flesh of a dozen wounds and knitted them closed with thoughts as delicate as silk thread. Felt shattered bones and reformed them, stronger than before. It was the most complex healing she'd ever attempted, the most powerful, and it worked. Kalen's howl of renewed strength shook the very foundations of the citadel. The sound was triumph and fury and fierce, wild joy, the sound of death denied, of hope reborn. But cold steel pressed against Seraphine's throat from behind. "Don't move," Cressida breathed, "or I open her up." The battle froze. "Shift back," Cressida commanded. "Now!" Kalen's wolf rippled to human form, naked, covered in blood, silver eyes blazing with helpless fury. "Let her go, Cressida." The king who hid his mate like a shameful secret. Cressida laughed. "Your father was weak too. That's why my predecessor killed him." Something cold crystallized in Seraphine's chest. Not fear. Clarity. He's monologuing. He's forgotten what I am. She understood bodies better than anyone alive, where blood flowed, where nerves clustered, where a single precise strike could incapacitate even the strongest wolf. Kalen, she thought through their bond. When I move, kill him. His eyes widened. Understanding flickered. Trust me. A heartbeat. 2. She moved. Her elbow drove into Cressida's solar plexus with perfect precision. As he doubled over, she inverted her healing energy, disrupting instead of knitting, overloading nerves instead of soothing. Cressida screamed as his body betrayed him, muscles seizing, blade falling from nerveless fingers. Kalen was on him before he hit the ground. Claws tore through Cressida's chest, closing around his still beating heart. "Power is taken," Kalen said softly. "That's what you taught me." He ripped the heart free. Cressida crumpled. The rebellion collapsed with him. But Seraphine's vision was graying. The inverse technique had cost more than she'd realized. "Seraphine," Kalen caught her before she fell. "Stay with me, don't you dare." Darkness swallowed everything. Light, warmth, distant voices. Seraphine drifted between consciousness and oblivion. She was aware of her body, blankets, pillows, steady heartbeat, and him. His presence wrapped around her like armor, emotion streaming through their bond. "Please wake up. Please don't leave me, please." She forced her eyes open. A high ceiling painted with stars. Golden light streaming through tall windows. A room that screamed of wealth and importance. And Kalen slumped beside her bed, head resting near her hip, hand clutching hers like a lifeline. Still wearing blood-stained clothes from battle, as if he hadn't moved since carrying her here. "Kalen," she whispered. His head snapped up. For one frozen moment he simply stared, afraid to believe. Then his composure shattered entirely. "Seraphine." He gathered her into his arms, shaking. 3 days. You've been unconscious 3 days. The healers couldn't. I thought I'd lost you." 3 days? The technique you used nearly killed you. Thessaly said you burned through your entire life reserve. Another minute and you would have been gone forever. But I'm not gone. I'm here. Don't ever do that again. His voice was fierce, cracking with emotion. I can't survive losing you. I'd tear down the world. I couldn't let him kill you. At the cost of your own life? At any cost. She smiled weakly. You would have done the same. He had no argument. They both knew it was true. What happens now? She finally asked. Something shifted in his expression, vulnerability receding, replaced by anticipation. Now we stop hiding. The throne room had been scrubbed clean, but Seraphine could still smell the ghost of battle beneath the perfume and incense. Could still see, in her mind's eye, the bodies that had lain where nobles now stood in their finest silks. Every eye watched them enter. Lords and ladies in clothes that cost more than most families earned in a lifetime. Warriors in ceremonial armor polished to mirror brightness. Servants lining the walls, their faces carefully blank, but their eyes hungry with curiosity. And the surviving council members, wolves who would determine whether Kaelin's reign continued or ended in disgrace. They stood apart from the crowd, a knot of power and suspicion, watching their king approach with expressions ranging from carefully neutral to openly hostile. She wore borrowed finery, a gown of midnight blue that matched his colors perfectly, the fabric so soft against her skin that it felt like wearing water. Her hair had been arranged in an elaborate style by servants who'd tried not to stare at the scars on her arms from the battle. A delicate silver circlet rested on her brow. But underneath the beautiful clothes, underneath the carefully applied cosmetics and the borrowed jewels, she was still just a healer from a minor pack. Still the Omega nobody had wanted. Her hands trembled slightly as they walked. Kaelin's fingers tightened around hers. You are so much more than that. His emotions whispered through their bond, warm and certain. You are brave. You are fierce. You are mine. And you're about to become the most powerful woman in the 7 territories. They stopped before the council. My lords, my ladies, my people. Kaelin's voice rang across the assembly. You've heard rumors about the healer who saved your king. The woman who broke the rebellion with a technique no one had ever seen. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. The truth is both simpler and more complicated. He extended his hand toward her. Allow me to present Seraphine of the Valdris Pack, healer, warrior, and for 3 years, my secret mate. The throne room erupted. Gasps of shock, exclamations of disbelief, outraged sputtering from the older nobles. You expect us to accept this? A council member stepped forward. An Omega? A nobody from a provincial pack? As our queen? I expect you to accept reality. Kaelin's voice became steel wrapped in silk. Seraphine and I have been bonded for 3 years. The mark on her shoulder proves it beyond question. She is my mate, my equal, and if you have objections— His silver eyes swept the crowd with deadly intent. I invite you to voice them. Personally. In the challenge ring. Silence. The noble went, pale and retreated. This woman fought beside me against Cressidon's coup. She risked her life, nearly gave it, to save your king and your kingdom. If that doesn't earn your respect, nothing will. He turned to face Seraphine fully, and suddenly the crowd faded away. I've hidden you for too long, he said, his words for her alone even as everyone listened. I've asked you to endure humiliation and loneliness. I told myself it was to protect you, but the truth is, I was afraid. Afraid of what? Of this moment. Of standing before everyone and admitting that the Alpha King's greatest weakness is a woman who can bring him to his knees with a single smile. His thumb traced circles on her palm. I was afraid they'd see how much power you have over me, how completely I belong to you. Tears blurred her vision. But I'm not afraid anymore. He lifted her hand to his lips. I love you, Seraphine. I have loved you since the moment I first saw you, and I will love you until the stars themselves burn out. He faced the crowd one final time. Today, I claim this woman before all of you as my bonded mate, my partner, my queen. Anyone who threatens her threatens me. Anyone who disrespects her disrespects the crown. His voice dropped to something dangerous and absolute. And anyone who harms her will learn exactly why they call me the Alpha King. Silence stretched for an eternity. Then, slowly, the wolves in the throne room began to kneel. One by one at first, then in waves, until the entire assembly had dropped to their knees in acknowledgement of their new queen. Even the council member who'd objected knelt, his face carefully blank. Seraphine looked out at the sea of bowed heads, overwhelmed by the impossibility of it all. 3 years of hiding. 3 years of being told she was worthless, unwanted, nothing. And now, she was queen. What do I do? She whispered. His smile was fierce and proud and utterly devoted. Whatever you want. You're the most powerful woman in the 7 territories now. He squeezed her hand. And I'll be right beside you, every step of the way. 6 months later, Ironhold had transformed. The healing halls that had once been a place of desperate last resorts, where warriors came only when death was certain without intervention, now bustled with purpose and pride. Seraphine had established a new order of healers, trained in both traditional techniques and the methods she'd developed herself. Young wolves who would once have been dismissed as too weak for warrior training now found purpose and respect in the healing arts. Warriors who had once scorned medical aid, preferring to let wounds fester rather than admit vulnerability, now sought treatment freely. The old stigma was dying slowly but surely, replaced by a new understanding. That healing wasn't weakness but wisdom, that preserving strength was as valuable as demonstrating it. The changes spread beyond medicine, rippling outward like stones dropped in still water. Omegas were being recognized for their contributions, not just as mates and servants, but as valuable members of pack society with skills and perspectives uniquely their own. A council seat had been created specifically to represent their interests, the first in the history of the 7 territories. Servants were treated with dignity. Their wages increased. Their working conditions improved. Several had been elevated to positions of real authority based on merit rather than birth. The old ways of blood and brutality were giving way to something better, something more sustainable. It wasn't happening overnight. Centuries of tradition couldn't be undone in months, but the direction was clear. Progress, slow but inexorable. Commander Alara had been promoted to captain of the Queen's Guard, a position Seraphine had created specifically for the woman who'd risked everything to help her reach Kaelin that terrible night. It turned out Alara had been secretly loyal to the king for years, planted among the staff to identify threats and protect assets the crown couldn't openly acknowledge. The anonymous note had been her way of reaching out to Seraphine without compromising her cover. A lifeline extended in the dark. Now she commanded 50 of the finest warriors in the kingdom, all sworn to protect the queen with their lives. Seraphine had protested at first. She didn't need guards, didn't want to be treated as fragile. But Kaelin had been immovable on the point. "Humor me," he'd said, his voice carrying that particular blend of command and plea that she'd never been able to resist. "After everything we've been through, let me have this one thing." So she'd relented, and she had to admit, she'd grown fond of Alara's dry wit and unflinching competence. Not everyone was happy about the changes, of course. There were still whispers in dark corners, still resistance from those who clung to tradition like a drowning man clings to driftwood. Lord Harwick led the opposition in council meetings, his complaints a constant drone that Kaelin bore with remarkable patience. But with each passing month, more wolves came to see what Seraphine had known all along. True strength wasn't about domination, it was about building something worth protecting. "You're thinking too hard again." She turned to find Kalen watching her from the doorway of their private chambers, his silver eyes warm with affection. "Thinking about how much has changed," she admitted. "Regrets?" "None." She crossed to him, sliding her arms around his waist. "I have everything I ever wanted." He pulled her closer, his chin resting on top of her head. "Even the burden of queenship? The politics and ceremonies and endless council meetings? Even those?" She smiled against his chest. "Although I could do without Lord Harwick's monthly complaints about the cost of the new healing program." "Harwick complains about everything. I'm considering sending him to the northern border for the winter." "Cruel. Practical." He tilted her face up, his expression softening. "Have I told you today that I love you?" "Only 7 times. You're slacking." "Then allow me to make it 8." He kissed her softly, sweetly, with all the tenderness of a man who knew exactly how lucky he was. "I love you, Seraphine. Today, tomorrow, and every day after." She kissed him back, pouring all her own love into the connection between them. 3 years of hiding, 6 months of building, a lifetime of joy stretching out before them, from unclaimed Omega to Queen of the 7 territories. It shouldn't have been possible. But then again, neither should a love that conquered politics, treachery, and death itself. As Kalen lifted her into his arms and carried her toward their bed, Seraphine thought about Isolde's sneering question from so long ago. "Still unclaimed?" She smiled against her mate's lips. No, she had never been unclaimed. She had simply been waiting for the right moment to show the world exactly who she belonged to. And now, everyone knew. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this story.